House Appropriations and Budget Committees. Ashley Hinson, Congresswoman, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
How do you assess what Speaker Pelosi said about the massive spending and tax bill?
Yeah, this budget process has been broken from the very start, Mike, and we saw that with how they laid out the reconciliation process. They set an artificial target and an artificial deadline and then said, okay, committees, go forth and figure out how to spend this money. Now we're hearing from Speaker Pelosi just today as well, oh, let's not talk about the money, let's talk about our values. Well, the problem is I value American taxpayers and I value Iowa taxpayers, and they are being completely disrespected in this process. The only thing that's bipartisan about this legislation that they're moving forward is the opposition to it. We had one Democrat vote against final passage yesterday in the Budget Committee.
Now, it's not just that massive package the Democrats want. There's also funding the government beyond September 30th this week, bipartisan infrastructure package, and, of course, the debt limit. What are your expectations on those issues this week?
Yeah. Well, I think Speaker Pelosi miscalculated when she tried to tie all of these things together. I think she would have had bipartisan support for a continuing resolution to keep our government open and funded and keep those essential services going. But in essence, when they're pushing forward with a $3.5 trillion bill, which might I add is actually more like $4.3 trillion the way it's written, that's just irresponsible. It's reckless. It disrespects taxpayers. So they have a lot of work to do. They have a lot of dissension within their own caucus, but I can tell you that Republicans are about targeted spending, we're about responsible spending, and we're about respecting taxpayers in this process.
You are introducing a measure called the Back to Work Act. What are your goals with that piece of legislation?
Yeah. Well, I'm introducing this piece of legislation, the Back to Work Act, because what we've seen is a government that wants to pay people to continue to stay home. Just a few weeks ago, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez introduced a piece of legislation to continue those enhanced unemployment benefits. We don't need these pandemic-era policies to be permanent. We need to focus on getting people back to work, back to health, and back to normal. So my bill would basically pump the brakes on AOC's policies that she wants to move forward with. Let's figure out what is the issue with the supply chain. What's the issue with unemployment in this country? There are 10.9 million jobs available. We need to get people back to work. And so that's what we're working on, and that's what that piece of legislation will prioritize.
To the border, what are your assessments of what we're seeing at the border right now?
Yeah. It's an absolute surge of illegal immigrants at the border, and we've been asking questions to Secretary Mayorkas, which I heard you played some clips from just a few minutes ago. We've been asking questions. Why is this happening? What are they doing about the border? We need to get back to policies that actually worked at the border. We need to build the wall. We need to make sure that Remain in Mexico policy is actually enforced. And I heard the Secretary's interview as well, and we have a lot of questions about enforcement. They aren't truly enforcing the law. We know that. We know people are being released into this country, and they can't properly track them. So we'll continue to hold them accountable for these failed policies under the Biden administration, because this is a safety and security issue for Iowa families and American families.
Do you get a sense some of your Democratic colleagues are getting more frustrated with what we're seeing from our southern border?
Well, absolutely. And you've heard people in Texas representatives speaking out about what's happening at the border. I had a chance to go down to the border myself in April. We had a roundtable with local sheriffs, for example, and they were Republicans and Democrats. And this is not a partisan issue. They are crying out for help to keep their communities safe and secure in Texas. I look at it as an Iowa issue because every state's a border state. Interstate 35 comes straight up into Iowa. So the drugs, the human smuggling, all of the cartels that are winning in this situation, we need to put a stop to it. And it's time the Biden administration stops turning a blind eye to the situation at the border.
Congresswoman Ashley Hinson of the great state of Iowa, live from a beautiful kitchen. Thanks so much for your time. Have a great week.